On this episode, Molly Irani shares the raw bootstrap story of building a wildly successful restaurant group from nothing during the recession. Molly breaks down what actually works in hospitality. Molly, welcome. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you, Roger. What a treat. Thanks for having me.
Restaurants were in your family growing up, and you started your first restaurant from scratch, and your company has grown. Tell me about what your biggest challenges were and what you knew going into it and how it all turned out. And let's start there.
All right. Well, that's a big place to start. I grew up in a family-run restaurant, and it sort of got the hooks in me at a very early age of the joy of being in service. And it also gave me a very clear picture of the challenges of running an independent restaurant. And I saw my parents, in there. My mom was in there at 4 a.m. rolling out the croissant dough, and my stepdad was up all night trying to balance the books. And so I really had a behind the scenes glimpse of what it's really like. And also the bootstrapped way that so many of us get into this industry. So
Yes.
when my husband and I had relocated from California to Asheville, North Carolina, and it was the middle of the Great Recession, my husband was in real estate and the market was crumbling and we had to find a new gig and we didn't want to leave this town. We loved this area. We had just dug roots. We had just settled our young family. We had just bought our first house. And we were trying to figure out what the town needed. And it really was one of the full-blown midlife crisis, Hail Mary, like we're falling off the cliff, so we might as well jump in the direction we want to go kind of thing.
Wow.
And he came up with this vision. And I had been really encouraging him to, if we're going to take this risk, you might as well jump towards the thing that really lights you up, something you're really excited about doing.
I love
And
it.
then he said he wanted to open a restaurant, and I told him he was out of his mind. And I said, "Forget everything I said about following your bliss. It's so hard. Like, honey, you don't understand. It is such a hard industry." But needless to say, he sold me on the idea. And he did that by writing a business plan that was so thorough. Using his MBA background, he really
Excellent.
applied the marketing knowledge that he had learned. Also, we were 39 years old. So we had a whole history of professional work out in the world that we could bring to this space. So he wrote a great business plan. He sold me on the idea. And the big piece of it that got me involved in this was, or that really tipped the balance for me into wanting to say yes and jumping on this adventure, is he had an exit strategy in that business plan, not for us to exit the business, but to exit the phase of running the business where we do everything all by ourselves. And so many restaurateurs, and this is what I witnessed growing up, is that so many restaurateurs get stuck in that phase for their entire careers when they're running an independent restaurant. So he sold me that we could grow. He sold me on this idea that we could approach our business from the perspective of growth from the very beginning. And that was how we went into it. So when we first started, we had nothing. We had no money. We had no background. I mean, I had grown up in the industry, but I didn't have any professional training in it. And my degree was in child psychology, and I had been working in an entirely different field. His degree was in, he had an MBA, but he had been working in real estate. So we were going in as green and newbie as you can possibly get. And it was the middle of the recession when banks were on lockdown and no one was lending money. So, especially not to two totally newbie restaurateurs. So, the biggest challenge that we faced was lack of preparation and lack of funds. But both of those challenges turned into what I view now, 16 years later, that we have a growing, thriving business. I view those two things, those what we thought were challenges, as actually some of our greatest assets.
So we have so much in common. I have a very similar story, starting a restaurant with no restaurant experience, an MBA, and grandiose visions. I write a business plan asking for $1 million. So let me ask you, how did you get funding? Because you can't start a restaurant with no money.
Yeah. Well, let's set the stage a little bit. This was 2009 in Asheville, North Carolina. And our town was really being impacted by the recession, but it was also going through a renaissance. in the sense that the downtown was really being re-energized and a lot of interesting businesses were starting up, other restaurants were starting up, and there was a lot of energy in downtown Nashville. So what we had to find was the elusive, almost impossible to find combination of perfect location in downtown Nashville so that we would immediately be activated just with the walk around tourism and traffic. It was a big piece of our success, honestly. Like, the
Yeah.
location that we picked was it, but it had to be a second generation restaurant that was going out so that we basically would be inheriting all of the FF&E from that space.
Same with me. My place had everything. It had failed restaurants before I got there, and we had a stigma to overcome. But think of the money you saved, we saved. Yeah, because the FF&E was there. Excellent. Okay, keep going. This is great.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
Love it.
long story short, this was in the particular moment of the recession where the banks were on lockdown. President Obama at the time had just promised to fund the SBA, but the funds weren't, it would take time for those funds to actually
Yes.
flow through the SBA and out into banks. So we were in that critical moment of
Oh,
time. So we took this business plan to the Small Business Administration. They said, wow, this is such a good business plan. Can we use this as a model for other entrepreneurs? But by the way, we can't give you any money because we're waiting for funds to arrive in our bank account. So that particular moment was impossible to do any type of traditional funding. So we wrote a letter to our friends and family asking for micro loans, and with a handful of $2,000 to $7,000 loans, we pieced together just enough money to put a down payment on the space and a down payment on the FF&E for the business that was going out. And we essentially started that restaurant with about $70,000. The only reason we could even get to that number was because the business that was going out agreed to a payment plan for the
oh,
FF&E.
good.
So we were paying them
Excellent.
like
There's always a way.
$1,200 a month. Yeah, it was
Hmm.
bootstrapped.
Right.
Everything was a mess. The equipment, literally our walk-in was duct taped together and had a air conditioning unit inside it, strapped to the ceiling to keep the temperature. I mean, it was as bootstrapped as you can possibly get. It was a mess. We had to rely on creativity,
Yeah.
ingenuity,
I love this.
and just, sweat labor, getting a group of friends in there to help us clean up, purge, and redesign this space.
Ajinomoto is your answer to every busy dinner rush spent deep in the weeds. When hungry customers walk through your door, they expect good food that tastes homemade. But making every dish from scratch cuts into your profit, especially with the cost of ingredients and labor. That's where Ajinomoto Foods comes in. Ajinomoto has a huge catalog of fast, easy to prep, frozen Asian products that taste and look homemade. That includes classics like fried rice, dumplings, and onion rings, and new trendy fusion plates like kimchi chicken pot stickers. Choosing Ajinomoto is choosing over 100 years of proven expertise in the food service space. Choose to save time and money in your busy kitchen without compromising on the quality your guests expect. Learn about Ajinomoto at ajinomotofoodservice.com. You had a dream, you had passion, you had grit, you had tenacity, and there was no turning back, like you said. And I hate that cliche, failure is not an option, but essentially, you did everything it took, whatever it takes, we're going to make this work. That is the spirit of entrepreneurship. And that's what this business is all
100%.
about. So many restaurants start out like you do, bootstrapping. I think I can do this. I'm going to do this. And you got everything on the line. You can't afford for it not to work. So that is a
Right.
fantastic story. With that said, Molly, when you've grown, and we're going to talk about your growth, and it started with that first restaurant, and now you've got multiple locations and different concepts and all that sort of thing. But when you walk into any of your restaurants, maybe the very first restaurant, the Indian cuisine in downtown, what is it? What do you feel? You walk through the door and you look around. What goes through your mind on a deep level? What do you think about? I know it's pride, but it's so much more than that. Like, how does it make you feel at your core?
I love that question, Roger, because it's the heart, what hooked me in this industry. And
Mhm.
every time I walk in our spaces, well, there's two sides to my answer. So the first side is we set out to represent another culture in our restaurant spaces. It was my husband is from India and he was missing the food of his homeland and didn't feel at that time that it was represented in the West in the way that he had experienced it growing up. We wanted our spaces to reflect that. We wanted to transport people from a sidewalk in Asheville, North Carolina, to the vibrancy and energy and color that you experience in India. So we had a creative challenge to do that, but we did it by engaging all of the senses. So what are you smelling when you walk through the door? What do you see? What are you hearing? The Bollywood music blasting, the energy, the feeling of the people that are working in the space, all of that contributes to help transport our guests to this magical experience that we had had in India. And so I feel that that's number one. That's what I notice when I come in. I'm like, what do I, and
Mhm.
I train all my managers on that. What do you see? What do you smell? What
Yeah.
do you
Right.
feel? What do you notice? All the senses are part of that picture and they're all equally important. The second thing that I feel
Beautiful.
is we set out to create a space where everyone in our town would feel welcome, socioeconomically, culturally, age-wise. And we wanted to create spaces that really paid attention to how we're welcoming people while maintaining this fun, casual, lighthearted, high energy space. We didn't want people to feel overwhelmed or excluded or like this, I don't belong here. So when I walk in our space, the thing that brings me the most joy is when I see that lineup, people sitting at the bar, posted up next to each other from all walks of life, from all different ages. You've got college students running in to grab a quick bite before their classes. You've got older people coming in wanting to have full 101 introduction of Indian food because they've never had it before. We try to accommodate that full spectrum, and we're really trying to exist in that space between fast casual and fine dining, where you have the casualness of fast casual, but you have the attention to detail and the care that you experience in fine dining. So when I walk in our restaurant spaces and I see that, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say that it moves me to tears. It really does. It's the hook.
Ah,
It's what energizes
I
me, and it's
get
the
that.
gift of our industry.
Oh,
It's such a rare thing
and at
in
the
our world.
true, at the core of that, not just you and your husband and your whole team, if everyone imparts that feeling, that is the essence of hospitality right there, how you want to make guests feel. That's awesome. Let's talk about your people first culture. Now, you sort of term it as lifting people up, not managing down. Let's talk about that. What does that mean?
Yeah, it actually, again, I'll go back to the beginning question you asked me about, like, what were the challenges we initially faced
Okay.
when we didn't have any
Yes.
money to attract talent from the outside. We were new restaurateurs, we were inexperienced, we were a concept nobody yet knew. We had to rely on how it felt to work in the space. That was all we had to attract people and talent. And we got incredibly lucky and blessed that we started with a group of people that were highly committed because they really believed in this vision and they were excited to be a part of it. And we grew them along with us, and we all learned on the job together. And fast forward a few years into that, we realized that what was happening is as we could get more financially stable and pay more competitive wages and benefits and be able to have a more solid package, so to speak, on that level and be more competitive on that level, what we realized was it was the culture that we had built that was the hook that was actually holding people and preventing burnout in an industry that
Mm.
struggles with burnout because the jobs are hard. They can
Very,
be really
very definitely.
intense.
Yes.
Yes.
Hmm.
So
Right.
that culture became our primary organizing principle in the business. And I remember the moment actually when we realized it. And I remember saw a Howard Schultz quote on a business card. And I'm going to paraphrase, so I'm not getting this exactly right, but the quote said something like, "We are not in the business of serving coffee. We are in the people business, and we happen to serve coffee," or something like that.
Yes.
So Marwan came to our manager meeting that day that he saw that quote, and he was like, "This is what we've been trying to say. This is a really, succinct way of saying it." And so we reorganized our management materials and trainings to really be focused around this idea that we are not a food business. We are a people business that happens to serve awesome food.
Absolutely.
And that
Absolutely.
way of shifting is sort of like you shift the lens, right? And you're starting to see things through that lens so that everybody on the team, every manager, if in any position of responsibility, is recognizing that the people in that business are the number one asset of the business. and everything has to be organized accordingly. It affects every.
So you have a family. You have a team that is family, acts like family, feels like family, but they're not employees in your mind. And that when people feel like that, the guests can just feel that too. And they know that the restaurant's running on all eight cylinders and everything is not controlled chaos. It comes from the heart. People are there for the right reasons. They care about that personal interaction and touch, getting to know their guests. I mean, this is the absolute core foundation of, again, let's go back to that word hospitality. This is a magic formula, and a lot of restaurants don't realize how important that is first. And it goes so far above and beyond the food and the ambiance. I always believe that the people first is really the competitive advantage. So thank you so much for sharing. Let's talk about onboarding and training philosophies. Like, I don't know, you have longevity with your leadership team. Are you having any labor issues at at the line level at all?
I think everybody in our industry is having issues at the line level. Ever since the pandemic, things really got disrupted.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah,
will say
no
that
doubt.
the cultural touchstones that I was mentioning before helped us ride that out without as much turnover as a lot of people were dealing with. But it's still a challenge, and attracting new talent, holding talent, making sure that your people are able to grow in the direction that really lights them up, that really excites them. Those are the key things
Yes.
that have helped us make it through a very challenging time in our industry. And I do think that, we talk a lot of in our industry, there's a lot of focus there as there needs to be on the product, on the output, on revenue. And that's obviously very important. You can't have a business. You can't take care of your people if you don't have money to take care of your people. So all of that is as important. But I think the piece that we're missing oftentimes in our industry is how much the culture behind the scenes inspires people to want to show up to be in hospitality,
Mhm.
to want to show up for jobs that can be intense in terms of like when you're talking about an on the line job, that's something that you got to show up 100%. You are all in for that shift. It is full on for the entire shift. And to motivate people to want to show up to work that way, what really sustains that motivation is the culture of a business. And I just think we're not having enough conversations about how do you build. That's why I wrote this book. It's like I wanted to really lean into as an industry, how do you build that kind of culture? What's going on behind the scenes that makes people want to show up and be in that space and work in that space? And that's really what holds people way beyond. I mean, everybody should be trying to maximize what they can pay their teams. But what holds a team and prevents burnout way beyond the rate of pay or the benefit package is how they feel at work. That's the thing. That's what sustains them.
You probably have two kinds of team members: those that do an absolute stellar job, perhaps on the line. That's all they want to do. And then you've got people that do a great job and they want to grow in your business and turn into leaders, or they want additional responsibility and they thrive on that. So, would you say that's part of your culture now, and that you recognize talent, you offer people responsibility if they want it, and you incentivize them for doing so, but then you applaud those rock solid 200 percenters that are doing the same job and they love doing that? And you don't want them not to do that because they're so consistent and they're so quality minded. I had that in my restaurants, and I'm hearing that you've got a combination of those people too. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the gold of business. And, you're not going to be for everybody. It's not like everybody is going to, no matter what kind of culture you have, it's not the right fit for everyone. But for the people that are
Right.
invested in you
Mhm.
and that believe in your concept, that is your gold as a business. And being able to nurture those people and help them grow into the careers that light them up, that they really want, that they're motivated for, that is really what builds the culture. And, there's a great book that I read. It's a really short little pamphlet, but it's one of the required readings for our managers. And it's the name is Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. And there's this framing that they use in this book,
Ooh,
which I love. Yeah. And the framing is to think of growth as a rock climbing wall instead of a ladder. So it's not that we always have the position and for growth, even though we are a growing company, we're growing for our people so that we can hold on to our people, so we can provide exciting opportunities for them. It's never going to be a ladder. It's never going to be like, if you do
Yes.
this, then this happens. And it's that we get pandemics and we
Hmm.
get
Right.
floods and we get crazy things in our industry all the time that make things unpredictable. So promising people that kind of ladder can be confusing for them and us. So if you think of it as a rock climbing wall, it's like every time you can provide somebody with another piece of knowledge or some other part of their career trajectory that they can grow in, if you're expanding the options. You're expanding the rocks in their wall, and ultimately that helps them climb in the direction that they want to go.
What if your POS did more than ring up orders? What if it actually ran your restaurant? Touch Bistro is an all in one cloud based POS and restaurant management system designed exclusively for restaurants. They help you run smarter, faster, and more profitably. Touch Bistro brings front of house, back of house, and guest engagement into one easy to use platform. From patented bill splitting and real time inventory to labor, profit tracking, loyalty, online ordering, and reservations, it's all connected. Touch Bistro is built for restaurants and built to perform. Check out touchbistro.com/restaurant rockstars. Now, my audience can get up to $6,500 US or $5,400 Canadian off your hardware. Terms and conditions apply. Speak to a Touch Bistro representative for details. Great analogy. I'm a climber myself, and sometimes to get to the next level, you've got to traverse and go sideways a little bit to get to that next level. That is so much, that is so wonderful, and relating it to that typical ladder that is not always the case. So thanks for sharing that. And let's shift gears again. Marwan, I'm just guessing, does he handle all your finances?
Now we have a whole team. There's
Go
a
ahead.
finance department, and because we have he is the CEO of the business. So yes, ultimately that's his responsibility, but he is also the CEO of so not just our restaurant group, but also Spicewalla, which is also rapidly growing. So he can't do the books anymore for both of these businesses. But it
Sure.
started out with
Yep.
me
Get it.
balancing the books and Isaac, our partner, doing the bills and Marwan figuring out the budget. I mean, we were very hands-on for the first, I don't even know how many years, but now we have a whole team on multiple levels like
Wonderful.
literally levels in our business. It's grown from the one tiny little restaurant office that was the size of a table into now a company.
So you had a part in that early on, and now you've got a full team doing all the key performance indicators and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But did you both dive in and take regular inventory and cost out your menus and try to make sure that, the business was making money, and menu engineering is so important and all those things? That was important then, and it's still more so now that you've grown your operation, right?
Absolutely, and we did not know what we were doing in the beginning, so we weren't profitable for years because we didn't know how to properly engineer our menus, and we learned on the job. So figuring those things out,
Right.
also adapting tools from other industries, business management practices from other industries that helped our business run properly. Those were the things that ultimately made it profitable, and we just had to figure it out. It's like, there's this idea that in the restaurant business, you have to think of everything as figure outable, or else it's really easy to throw in the
Yes.
towel and think, well, this is just too hard. But I think our industry also attracts people who are tenacious and creative in their thinking because it fosters that. We learn resilience on the job. And then
Absolutely.
that resilience becomes our superpower that helps us survive the roller coaster times that inevitably come in this business. So yes, to your question, we do menu engineer and all of that now. And as we grew, the ability to do that got easier in part because we were sharing the workload and were able to hire people that knew what they were doing to come into the business, but also these little things that you don't realize when you're really small. But as you grow, if you're saving 2 cents on every pound of chicken, and you're selling thousands of pounds of chicken a week across multiple cities and states, that savings is significant. And that is then how you're able to take better care of your people and offer better benefits. That whole cycle, it took us a long time to get there, but we did get there and it made a big difference.
That's a system you're talking about now. And I've always had this mantra, pennies equals dollars. And you just explained that to a T.
Yeah.
But it's so vitally important to have that feel for your business, that cash flow, every penny coming in, every penny go out, because every penny really does count, especially like you said, thousands of dollars. Think of the pennies and how that all adds up to the bottom line. So,
Yeah.
let me ask you about those systems, and let's dive maybe a little bit deeper into that, because our biggest challenge right now is labor costs are extremely low. I mean, the amount that we have to pay, especially in the kitchen, I talk about this all the time, and then rising costs for our food and our products, and margins are shrinking. And yet you still have to maintain value to the guest because there's a limit to what you can keep raising prices. So you really have to focus on those pennies to really counteract variables that are beyond our control. So there's a system to that too, and your team is probably diving in pretty deep to that. How do you overcome the inflation right now, and how do you maintain your margins?
Yeah, I mean, that is the question of the hour, Roger. It's like I think for all businesses on the ground, that value engineering that you're talking about is there's
Mhm.
this magic spot, right? And it's different for every business.
Sweet
But
spot, I call it.
finding that magic spot is that's the jam. That's the goal. And so I think figuring out what the formula is for your specific business, where that sweet spot is, where you're matching how much you can charge with what fits your customer base. Also making sure that you're catching, this is the thing that took us a long time to learn, is catching the sort of hidden costs in a dish. For example, if something required too much time to make, the impact of that, the cost on the business is something that you don't learn initially. We had to figure that out.
Mhm.
That's
Right.
value engineering menu, really designing your menu
Yes.
appropriately, charging the right amount that fits the labor and the cost and the product and everything that goes into it. But I think the thing, if I had to nail, like, what's the one thing that we did that really made the biggest impact, it has to do with
Thank you.
minimizing waste. Minimizing waste is the thing. Because, and here, I'll give you an example. In the early days, I remember Marwan actually calculating. This is when he was doing the books and I was entering the things in QuickBooks, and well, we were all in it. He
Oh my God, you're
calculated.
bringing me back. I did the
Yeah, I
same.
know, right? We all have the
Roller
visceral memory is there entering the daily
Oh,
sales in
yeah.
QuickBooks. He calculated how much money we lost annually on lost pens. The pens that disappear with the customers and also the Sharpies that disappear in aprons and the one Sharpie,
Mhm.
you pull out for the line on the kitchen and then it's gone. So we calculated that because our goal was we wanted to take our team to India and we had to figure out how to
Oh, wow.
afford to do that. Yeah, because like, we're a
Yes, yes.
small startup business, like,
Uh,
we have no savings. How are we possibly gonna take our team to India? We did it
Fabulous.
by tracking the pens, because he figured out that when he added up the annual cost of lost pens, it was a ticket to India. So we had to stop losing the
Right.
pens. We had to work backwards off
And it's
of that.
Well, this is interesting because it is part of our business, whether it's innocent theft or it's not innocent theft. This is a low margin business. Every time
Yeah.
you sell that dish, you're not putting that money in your pocket. And I went so far so long ago as to break down a steak dinner, and the steak cost us this to put it on the plate, and the labor to cook it cost this, and everything was,
Yeah.
the pennies that added up, and the insurance on the building and the mortgage and all this kind of stuff in one steak dinner. And oh, you just broke that plate and it was $5. We just lost money selling that steak, and that profit that was lost came off the profit on the next steak we're going to sell. And they got it, and then suddenly people started to care and pay attention, and those losses just disappeared. And then we continued to hire based on that culture, people that truly cared about the business. And much like yourself,
Yeah.
very low turnover, very high longevity, and people that felt like they were part of something bigger than themselves.
I think you hit on
Yeah.
something really important there. I wanted to just pull out of what you said, because when I'm talking
Okay,
about
please.
something as straightforward as like stop losing the pens, right? Nobody wants to be losing pens. Everybody wants to be able to like not have waste, but you hit on the
Right.
crux of it. It all comes down to getting buy-in from your team. So the way that we got people to pay attention to where the pens were disappearing is by explaining that we wanted to take them to India. So it's getting the buy-in, helping
Awesome.
them feel
Yeah.
invested. Where is that silverware going? When they're scraping the plates into the trash, how are they catching the silverware and making sure it doesn't get thrown away? And why? Why should they care about it? So really telling that story to your team and getting that full team buy-in is the only way that you can really prevent waste in a way that will really impact the revenue of the business and the overall, financial model of the business.
Smithfield Culinary is committed to offering your restaurant the perfect protein for every dish at every day part. They know that to meat lovers, a great serving of their favorite cut is more than just food, it's an experience. Take Smithfield's new ready-to-eat select bacon, where chefs won't leave a mess and your guests won't leave a trace, or their new ground chorizo that lets you serve up tasty smoky heat. Turn to Smithfield for the broadest portfolio of pork, such as bacon, ham, sausage, and more. When you partner with Smithfield, you serve what you love, and your guests will love what you serve. I taste Smithfield products at many restaurant shows, and they're always delicious. To order or more information, go to smithfieldculinary.com/Smithfield. Let's talk about marketing now, because it sounds like you've built not only the family of team members, but a family of your guests as well. Is it sort of a word of mouth thing? Is it social media? Like, what's your marketing strategy? Are you busy all the time, or do you really need to spend on marketing that's trackable, that's proven? Like, tell us about that side of the business, because that's really important to so many operators listening as well.
It is really important. And I think that, yes, we are super busy, and there are always times that we have to get the word out, whether we're starting in a new area, starting in a new
Busy.
city, or, being able to spread the word. We're about to open in Raleigh, Durham, Botiwala, and being able to really market to that community. Our thing is we believe in storytelling. So as much as we can connect the community around what our story is and help them understand who we are and why we want to be a part of that community, I believe that storytelling and marketing really matters. We've never really been big on paying for print advertising as much as storytelling. So that's a lot of social
Great.
media. It's a
Beautiful.
lot of content, it's a
Mhm.
lot of writing, trying to talk with the
Yeah.
community and also engaging with your community. We really do believe that restaurants are always deeply connected in their communities. They are the first place that people go to when they need help in a hurricane, when they need food prepared for
Mhm.
emergencies.
Mhm.
And the more that you can show up in that way, you're also connecting with your community, which helps in the storytelling. It helps your community know who you are as a business. And so we did a
Absolutely.
lot of like give back nights
Wonderful.
and for local schools and things like that as our marketing instead of paying for traditional advertising because we felt like it told a more clear story of who we are.
Community minded, give back, and that pays dividends in so many cases. It's wonderful. Let's talk
Yeah.
about the spice company. Now, Oprah recognized your spices as her favorites. Did that lead to any positive results? Like, how did that just evolve naturally from the restaurants? Like Marwan's culture and the spices that go into your dishes became like retail. Is that what happened? Tell
Yeah.
me about that.
Yeah. I mean, it is really a whole story, but and I wrote about it all in the book because it's such an amazing story. But the highlight reel of it is that it was a whim of an idea, similar to our restaurant, where it started with a spice distributor or a food distributor coming to us and saying that other chefs were asking for spices that he was struggling to source, and he was asking where we were getting all of our spices. At the time, we were
Yes.
importing the spices that we needed that we couldn't find. And the idea initially was, let's just get a small little clean room factory and be able to import our own spices and store them and be able to offer them to other chefs that are looking for these spices. Well, then our marketing team put it in this beautiful package. And then that package was so awesome that it really called to be in retail. And we started slowly, slowly growing this into a full CPG line, retail line, wholesale line. But we were once again, jumped in the deep
Wow.
end. We were flying a plane that was half built. We were trying to figure it out and learn all these different avenues and form factors and all these things that you have to learn. And then Oprah picked this gift box, a Spicewalla gift box, a kitchen essentials box that's these beautiful rows of colorful tins in a box. She picked it for her favorite things. And at the time, we had a handful of burnt out line cooks that had moved out of the restaurant space that needed a break that were filling spices in a clean room in a little factory. And none of us knew anything about how to scale, packaged good line. And all of a sudden there was a million things to do. And it's a risk because what happens is you get notified that you're being considered for this list. So
No
you make
kidding.
like a
Awesome.
semifinalist. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And, that's a
Wow.
day you'll never forget as a small
Nope.
business. And you
Mhm.
have to make the decision to invest in all of these things. We had to scale up. We had to hire people. We had to import 40,000 tins to be able to reach the sort of benchmarks that would be needed for a holiday selling season if you make it on Oprah's list, but you have no idea if you're going to make it. So it's a
Mhm.
big
Excellent.
risk. But
Of
this
course.
was one of those, another like, you got to go for it. That's the opportunity of a lifetime for a small
Of course.
business. So
Absolutely.
Marwan, yes, so Marwan just moved into Spicewalla. One of our very first hires, James Grogan, moved over there. He had started out as the line cook, and he was now running this Spicewalla team. And Marwan moved in, and I took on more with the restaurant group so he could focus over there. And we made the list, and the business skyrocketed and has been growing
Fantastic.
ever since. The Oprah
Oh,
effect is
yes.
very
Oh, I can
real.
only imagine.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. What a great story that is. Give us an overview quickly of your book.
You. Yeah, service ready. I wrote the book that I felt like I needed when I was starting out because there were really wonderful books. Danny Meyer's Setting the Table is mandatory
Mhm.
reading.
Of
The
course.
copy I have
Yes.
is every page is dog-eared. There was a lot of inspiring books, but what I didn't see reflected was this sort of bootstrapped version that we were having and that I know so many restaurateurs are having of figuring it out on your own and sort of making do with not enough resources and not enough money in the bank. And figuring out how to really run this business as a married couple, that was a thing we had to learn our way through and grow a team up into positions of leadership that they didn't have professional training for. I wanted to share that story. It's an amazing story, but I also wanted to share it because I felt like it was the book that I needed. It would have helped me to hear somebody sort of that was successful, that had reached the other side, so to speak, of the struggle of it, reflect back things about how to build a culture behind the scenes that actually inspires people to want to show up and provide excellence and hospitality. So I shared that part of the story, and it's a very honest and real behind the scenes what we went through and how we grew this group together
Nice.
and the lessons that we learned. So part of it is kind of like part memoir and part business takeaways. I'm sharing the management
Awesome.
practices and the really practical things that we pulled out of our experience that became our sort of foundational building blocks that we believe now, looking back on it, these were the things that made it work. These were the things that helped us reach success, financial stability, and also success from the perspective of retention and growing your people along with you.
Well, along with the book that you just shared, this conversation has been very inspirational to our audience. You've given us so many
Thank
nuggets
you.
of key operating philosophies, and I think everyone can take a page out of this interview as well as your book. So thanks for being a great guest, Molly, on the show. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Roger. It's
Terrific.
been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. It's so fun to talk to other restaurateurs that have had the same experience because you're like, and we can do it. So thank you
It
for the
goes back
opportunity
to
to
that
share our
passion for
story.
sure.
Yeah,
My
100%.
pleasure
Thank you.
entirely. That was the Restaurant Rockstars podcast. Thank you so much for our audience to tuning in. Thank you so much to our sponsors this week. Can't wait to see you all in the next episode. Stay well, stay tuned, and I will see you then. Restaurant owners and general managers, listen up. Your biggest challenges are labor and shrinking margins. Both kill your profit. I help restaurants find and fix those leaks. Last year, I uncovered over $300,000 in lost profit in 2 independent restaurants and $885,000 in a 5-location pizza chain. I specialize in controlling costs to maximize profit, training managers to become leaders, training front of house staff to sell, and marketing that drives trackable, new, and repeat business. If you want more profit, less hours, and a dream team staffing your restaurant, book a free 30-minute profit strategy session with me. Email roger@restaurantrockstars.com. That's ROGER at restaurantrockstars.com.